soon. So next session going to be handled by Professor B.S. Dayasagar, sir. Welcome you, sir. Dayasagar, sir. Good morning. Welcome you.
Good morning, Shyam Lal. Shyam.
Good morning, sir. Welcome
Yeah,
you
yeah.
in this summer school.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
So, so for participant, for your kind information, Professor Dayasagar, sir is going to talk about mathematical morphology in geoscience, remote sensing, and geospatial data science. Uh, I remember when it come to the morphology, mathematical morphology, the first name in India come to my mind is Professor Dayasagar, sir. So he has contributed a lot in the field of this mathematical morphology with applications in the field of geoscience and remote sensing. So I'll give a brief this biography about Professor Dayasagar, sir. So Professor Dayasagar sir is a full professor of the System Science and Informatics unit at the Indian Statistical Institute Bangalore campus. He has received his PhD degree in geoengineering and remote sensing from the Faculty of Engineering, Andhra University, Visakhapatnam, India in 1994. He was also the founding head of the department at SSIU Bangalore campus, and earlier he worked in the College of Engineering Andhra University and Center for Remote Sensing and Processing, the National University of Singapore in various positions during 92 to 2001. He served as an associate professor and researcher in the faculty of Engineering and Technology, Multimedia University, Malaysia during 2001 to 2007. And Professor Sagar has also made a significant contribution to the field of geoscience with a special emphasis on the development of spatial algorithm meant for geopattern retrieval analysis, reasoning, modeling, visualization by using concept of mathematical morphology and fractal geometry. He
Yes.
has published more than 85 research paper in journal and he's also authored guest edited 11 books and other special themes for the journal as well. He recently authored the book entitled called Mathematical Morphology in Morphology and Geoscience, CRC Press, and he recently co-edited two special issues called Filtering and Segmentation with Mathematical Morphology for IEEE Journal of Selected Topics in Signal Processing and IEEE uh, Applied Earth Observation and Remote Sensing in India for IEEE JS Star in 2017. His recent book, which called Handbook of Mathematical Geoscience, is Springer publisher, which reached that will be 8 lakhs so that will be downloads. He was elected as a member of New York Academy of Science in 1995, as a fellow of Royal Geographical Society in 2000, as a senior member in of IEEE Geoscience Society 2003, fellow of Indian Geophysical Union 2011. He is also the member of many international professional bodies, which few of them IAMG, and then a lot of RELS Bangalore, and so many. Uh, he was awarded the Dr. Balakrishnan Memorial Award of the Andhra Pradesh Academy of Science in 1995, and the Krishna Medal of the Indian Geophysical Union in 2002, the George Mathron Award in 2011 with the lectureships of the IAMG, the awards of the certification from the IAMG and appreciation in 2018. He is the founding chairman of the Bangalore IEEE GRSS section Bangalore. He has been recently appointed as a IEEE GRSS distinguished lecturer for the 2-year period from the 2022 to 2022. He is a editorial board member of the Computer and Geoscience and other journal related to the geoscience. He is also the editor-in-chief of the Springer publisher encyclopedia of the mathematical geoscience. That lot of more details are available. You can just Google it. You'll get about that. With this information, I welcome Professor B.S. Dayasagar sir to and request to start his session. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shyamlal. And you have given an elaborated introduction. To start the talk, and I want to give some background. This was the same talk I gave for IEEE TV on 2nd March, because all IEEE distinguished lecturers were supposed to give at least one talk during their term, and which would they keep it on under IEEE TV thing. And so those who have attended those talks, that particular talk on 2nd March, it would be the same repetition, right? So the title of the talk is Mathematical Morphology in Geoscience, Remote Sensing and Geospatial Data Sciences. I could see there were wonderful lectures given by various people, and one common component in all those talks given by eminent speakers is remote sensing, and other common component is geospatial aspect, right? So my talk would cover, but those who really want to know about the title of the school is Machine and Deep Learning, and there may be some connections to the machine and deep learnings for remote sensing applications, but the core idea of my talk is all about the mathematical morphology, how it has been employed. And I can say that this is the work that I've been doing ever since my PhD days. That was in 1994. So I always used to tell that some applications used to get kind of glorified because of the robust theory that they employ to get some kind of application specific results. And some applications will be glorified because of the kind of theory that they apply. And I can say that mathematical morphology is with a small amount of theory, but it has a wide ranging applications. And fortunately, we are the people who have been showing a lot of applications in the geoscience, remote sensing, and geospatial data sciences almost from mid-90s. So what would this lecture cover? And many times, and I used to see the moment we talk about remote sensing, and people would be tempted to talk about satellite remote sensing data, which I would say it is a primary data. But there are a number of products that would be derived from the primary data. As I could see, many have been talking about classification and segmentation and clustering and all that. So they have powerful algorithms to map the features. Why do people actually perform classification? So with a specific goal of mapping some particular feature, whether it is urban regions or roads or rail networks or some agriculture fields. Somebody is asking what is the difference between the horticultural plants and the actual agriculture fields. So these are all, the domain specific interests. But what I show here is a secondary byproduct from remotely sensed data that I would call as a digital elevation models. I think many of you are quite familiar with it, because the work started in the late 60s about generation of ortho maps and stereographic maps, and we used to see from the stereoscopy. But now we have very powerful digital elevation models of various spatial resolutions coming from the remotely sensed data acquired through microwave sensing methods and optical sensing methods. Each one of the approaches has its own advantages and disadvantages. But about a decade ago, people used to argue that there are many uncertainties in digital elevation models. But those people who have raised those issues of uncertainties and are slowly getting the proper answers because of the fact that now digital elevation models are available at very high spatial resolution, and of course at a high temporal resolution, right? So this lecture is about, if you are very keen to know about mathematical morphology, you will get something. But to talk about the complete mathematical morphology, it will take about 26 lectures. Each one of would be about 90 minutes. But it is not about, enlightening all of you in a short span of 1.5 hours about mathematical morphology. But I would like to cover, just to give you a kind of motivation, and what are the basic morphological operations, how elegant they are to when you are talking about some kind of application specific challenges. So as I mentioned, this mathematical morphology is more European, and in the sense it was started in the Fontainebleau, a small village which is about 80 kilometers away from Paris. And there is a very powerful school called Paris School of Mines, under which and this Center for Mathematical Morphology was, established. And there are two pioneers, and one of them was Georges Matheron, and who happens to be a student of Paul Levy. So Paul Levy has produced wonderful PhD students. Eventually, they have become founders of various different fields. Like one of them is mathematical morphology, and then geostatistics. And we all talk about spatial statistics, geostatistics. Geostatistics, father of geostatistics was Georges Matheron. And then fractal geometry was invented by, I should say, founded by Professor Mandelbrot. Mandelbrot was also happened to be a student of Paul Levy. So this is some background. And but so of late, people started using in Asian countries, and we are one of those fortunate groups to have been working in this area. And some of the applications, as I mentioned, are glorified due to the robust theory implemented, and some theories are glorified due to their various obvious successful applications. And I could see both from mathematical morphology. And the data that I'm going to show you subsequently is the digital elevation model data. Some of those DEMs were synthetic DEMs, and which we have actually simulated and which mimic the actual natural landscape. And some were actually derived from remotely sensed data. And then the features that were derived from the digital elevation models, all of that would be covered in my talk. And other data one can think of being is the demographic, economics, and environmental relevance. And you have, so whatever that data that you can mention or represent on a spatial map with XY coordinates, and in geography we call them as latitudes and longitudes. And I could listen to the previous talk by Dr. Ramesh about, it's all about QGAs. Very fascinated to see that there are many operations, including morphological operations, there are there to really implement and to get some outcome out of it. The main ingredients, like now it is, the buzzword is along with deep learning, machine learning, and people are talking about data sciences. And within the data sciences, I would say the spatial data science, the moment you specify the spatial component to each variable at a specific location, and which has a location significance, and you call that as a spatial data. And that doesn't necessarily be the digital elevation models and remotely sensed data. You have demographic, economics, and environmental relevance components, and thousands of variables you can represent in the spatial form. And then you can apply all these algorithms and techniques and approaches and framework that you have been hearing for the last almost 2 weeks. So what are the main ingredients? We talk about acquiring the data, which is a very important phase. And once you have a very accurate data that was acquired through whatever means you talk, and whether it is through satellites or through physical surveys and household surveys, And the moment you get that kind of data, and then what is that you want to actually do, and you want to try retrieving certain features, or I would call that as a phase of information retrieval. Once you retrieve some meaningful information from that spatial data, and you want to analyze it, and you have to somehow quantify the distribution of the information, and whether it is homogeneous or heterogeneous or very uniform across everywhere, across all the regions. And then how do you reason? And so what all that I'm talking is in a quantitative sense, the quantitative analysis of the information and quantitative reasoning of the information. And the moment you talk about information, and you have to talk about the relationships, in mathematics, and many people talk about mathematics is not all about talking about the objects. It's all about talking about the relationship between the objects. So how do you establish those relationships? For instance, there are two states, Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka. And so what kind of relationship that you can establish? One relationship is about distance. The other relationship is in the direction. And these are, I would call them as a kind of topological relationships. And then once you know about information retrieval and information analysis and information reasoning and information modeling and simulation and visualizations will come into picture. Now, another buzzword, and of late I started hearing about digital twins. Digital twin is typically a kind of simulated model, and which exactly mimics the natural phenomenon or its corresponding process. And one example I can mention is a kind of sand dune. I'm sure that sand dune can be actually, its morphology can be well studied through digital elevation models of the desert regions. And then how that sand dune is behaving. So the sand dune morphological changes that would happen probably over days or across the weeks or across months or across seasons. But can we really actually create its corresponding digital twin on our discrete space? So can we specify some kind of parameters, and if I tune a specific parameter, and how the sand dune behavior would change? And these are the things some about 2-3 decades ago, people from nonlinear physics used to talk a lot. They have given wonderful toy models, and one of those toy models that I can always mention is population dynamics, and how population dynamics would be changing, and how to study its corresponding behavior. And we have wonderful logistic equations, and which is simply based on a first order nonlinear difference equation. So, but those things, and with the advent of the satellite data, enormous satellite data, and with powerful tools like machine learning, deep learning, and various mathematical and statistical tools, we are able to extract relevant information very precisely. The moment data is accurate, and obviously our the retrieved information is also very precise. And with that kind of information, data, and the quantitative analysis tools, reasoning, can we create a digital twin? Of course, that is a kind of open challenge for all of us. And I could see for all these ingredients, retrieval, analysis, reasoning, modeling, simulation, and visualization. And if someone asks me, is there a single mathematical field that I can learn to handle these all ingredients, I can confidently tell mathematical morphology is one of those single mathematical fields to handle the various ingredients involved and encountered in spatial data science, right? So this is a slightly different definition of the data science that I give to understand the dynamical behavior of a phenomenon. I always used to tell, and we have spent almost 90% of our time and resources on mapping the features from the satellite data. It is not ended there, and whatever the maps that you have created, the maps are nothing but it's a noise-free information. And in the earlier talk, they have been talking about the water body extraction and irrigational tanks and all that, and how those water bodies are behaving across seasons. Is there a way that we can give a simple attractor which will explain the across season dynamics of the water bodies? And for that, what we need to do? And so it is not just water bodies, and we have various different phenomena that we see on the terrestrial surface. To understand the dynamical behavior of a phenomenon or a process, a good spatiotemporal model is essential. We are talking about spatiotemporal model, which is very prominent word, but in physics they talk about simple dynamical system. To develop such a model, well analyzed and well reasoned information that could be retrieved from spatial and or temporal data are important ingredients. So as I have already mentioned, mathematical morphology is one of the choices. And the difficult task for me that I have been facing for the last 15 years, and I have given hundreds of lectures, and I want to see, is there at least one person who would take up this topic to the heart and then work on this for another 30, 40 years. And so with that, whoever calls me, and I used to give the lectures on mathematical morphology and of course its applications. So mathematical morphology is an area of geoscience that most people don't realize will literally change the way they look at Earth. And this is actually given a nice quote by my good friend, Dr. Paul Rosen, who is an ISAR mission team leader. And so while I had to give the IGARS 2020 tutorial, and this was the quote that they mentioned to attract more audience. So in mathematical morphology, data is investigated with respect to another data. And if I am sure that some of you are very familiar with how mathematical morphology works. Even in QGS, and the previous speaker was talking about erosion, dilation, opening, closing operators. And all that operations would be done with respect to another probing rule, which we call it as a structuring element. And it has certain characteristic information. It has a shape, it has size, and it has a symmetric properties, and it has orientation, it has an origin. And that characteristic information would allow us to unravel hidden geometric, morphologic, and topologically relevant features from the whatever the data that you talk, whether it is demographic data or econometric data or satellite data or digital elevation models. So all that is mentioned here. And to give you just a glimpse of what is there in the subsequent slides, and these are the two co-founders of mathematical morphology, Georges Mathron and John Serra. And they have actually given this theory of mathematical morphology mostly to address a challenge given by French government in mid-60s. That is to find out what is the gold ore tonnage in Algerian mining fields. And for that, they started with a simple, interpolation technique, and which we are very familiar, Kriging technique. And that Kriging technique was actually invented by Georges Mathron, and by taking the master dissertation work of Danny Kreis, who was another South African mining engineer. And he got the idea by seeing that master's dissertation of Danny Kreis, and then subsequently he has given the interpolation technique the name after the Danny Kreis. And further, John Serra started giving erosion to shrink an object, and expansion to expand an object, and opening and closing or to smoothen the data from inside and outside. The basic foundation for those four fundamental morphological operations has actually come from Minkowski algebra. If you know about Minkowski sum and Minkowski subtraction, and you will typically understand how those things were extended to the morphological operations and the definitions, and subsequently from mid-70s onwards, and the people from computer engineering and core engineering fields, they realized that mathematical morphology is a powerful nonlinear theory which can be applied in both in computer science and electrical electronics field to address many of their challenges in mid-70s. And now it has been shown in geoscience, remote sensing, and geospatial data sciences. So the digital elevation model that I'm talking, a synthetic digital elevation model, which we have simulated by taking certain topographic parameters into consideration. And you can see all white shades are higher elevation zones, and darker shades are the lower elevation zones. Typically, if you want to segment it in a broadly with a, there are three trees here, and but within that you have so many sub trees, and all that you can see in the networks that we have extracted. I will show that in with a higher resolution. You can see what are those two important networks. Those two important networks, who is very dominantly, we'll see one of those networks is river networks, that is the stream networks, which are blue lines in a topographic map. And the network that we don't see in the topographic map is the ridge lines, which we call it as a ridge connectivity network. And these are the two networks which are dual to each other. And then the partition of the digital elevation models into hierarchical watersheds of various orders. And that is one application I would show how mathematical morphology had really helped us getting appropriate unique topological connectivity networks from digital elevation models. And if you look at many of the commercial softwares, and they give very powerful algorithms to extract these networks, but if the digital elevation model is rather with less undulations, not very intricate, not very rough, and then extraction of those connectivity networks would be a real challenge when you talk about the commercial software based algorithms. And so some of those gaps can be filled with the mathematical morphology. And then so that is one prominent application we have shown in whether we say it is remote sensing or geoscience. And the other application is given a kind of initiator, and then can we really create a landscape? Why do you want? And it is not just for aesthetic sense, but seeing a watershed within a river basin, and can we really simulate a similar kind of watershed? What are the tools and features that we require to simulate that? And that is the one study that I would show in subsequent slides if time permits. And then in watershed, and I would say the 2 or 3 prominent topological features are river networks, ridge connectivity networks, and watersheds. And much of our quantitative analysis, if you are familiar with the quantitative methods to study watersheds, to characterize watershed features and dynamics, is morphometry and hypsometric analysis. Morphometry typically takes the advantage of river network patterns, and then subsequently you have order designation methods, and then derivation of Hawthornian laws, law of number and law of length and law of area. And based on those 3 Hawthornian laws, and people started talking about what would be the potential dynamics of the watershed or a river basin. And subsequently, by taking the elevation contours into consideration, and they have given a hypsometric integral. And so watershed, is it a old watershed? Its behavior, and is it at the stage of monadnock stage, or is it at the stage of young stage? And young watersheds would behave very erratically, and then old watersheds will behave in very stable manner. And how to quantify that the degree of stability and the degree of erratic behavior or the monadnock stages? And they used to follow the hypsometric integral calculation, but we have entirely a different approach. And so many times I used to give a kind of daring statement. That statement is, if you have digital elevation model, and if you know about some geometrically relevant methods like mathematical morphology and fractal geometry and discrete mathematics, and then wavelet theories and rough set theory and fuzzy set theory, if you know about those things, and if you have digital elevation model as a source data, and that conventional morphometry and hypsometry do not need to be employed. And so that is all classical studies. But in modern studies, and I can say that mathematical morphology can address many of the challenges that were addressed by the classical quantitative morphometric analysis. So one of that is you can see this is actually an Apollonian space, and so that white space, Apollonian space, is packed with octagons of various different sizes, which I have shown with different color codes. And once you pack a given space, what is that space? And if you just remove the river network from the watershed basin or watershed the catchment, and what is left over is a kind of hill slope region. That hill slope region has to be packed with various different structuring elements, and which are ranging from this here I have shown an octagonal feature, right? So once you pack the given hill slope region with various gons of various different geometric shapes, and then you can derive some kind of shape, size and shape number relationships. And those relationships were really, the universal power law relationships, and at all scales, and it shows the same power law value. And from there we can derive some inferences through which you can really talk about the commonly sharing physical mechanisms. See, two watersheds may look similar in terms of morphometric quantities, but in terms of the morphological shape decomposition based power law relationships, and they would actually tell us about what is that basic distinction that two watersheds actually sharing. And so that is another case study. And then particularly from the spatial analysis, when you look at this, and there is a satellite data on that, there are some blue patches here, and which are typically the water bodies. And after those water bodies are mapped and shown in a kind of thematic form, just black and white, I would call as a simple map, or the information, a noise-free information showing water bodies and no water body region. And here the challenge is a kind of spatial optimization. And taking this data, and if someone asks you, and all these water bodies would get dried up due to drought, but government has money only to protect one of the water bodies within a kind of region, and which is that water body we can really protect, because government doesn't have money to protect all water bodies. And then you have to choose the water body to which the people living in and around those other water bodies can come there and fetch water with minimal energy expenditure. And that is where we require, the spatial optimization approaches. And what is that spatially optimized water body, from where it is easier to reach out to all water bodies with minimum energy expenditure. And if some of you may be very familiar with, traveling salesman problem, and similar traveling salesman problem, and how to adopt it in when you talk about water bodies. And we are not talking about the specific points, and we are talking about water bodies which are with various different shapes and sizes, and how to adopt that. And so for each water body, there is a kind of influence zone, and influence zone is like the map of influence zone is this. There is a water body, it is like a clustered, the custard apple, and you have the seeds around each seed, and there is some amount of pulp within the specific region and around each seed. And so if you treat each water body as a kind of a seed of the custard apple, and then what is the influence of each seed, and you can see that for this particular water body, its corresponding influence zone is this, right? And so those things, and how we derived using skeletonization by zone of influence technique. Similar ideas were actually also employed in taking all 28 or 29 states of India. And if someone asks you which is that state strategically located, always, interior states have the strategic importance, like Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, and those places. And then exterior states have a lot of disadvantages when you talk about, the location analysis or setting up a facility and such kind of things. And subsequently, you have this similar geospatial analysis based study of relevance to, studying the demographic patterns, or the geopolitical units and their organizations, how those geopolitical units would interact between, it is like interaction between the states. So that is always, the variable specific. What is that variable? You are talking about trade. And when you are talking about trade, which two states have a lot of, in the interaction and the force of interaction. And there the people used to employ, the gravity models like Newton's gravity models. But when you try to use that Newton's gravity model in a kind of, social sciences, and you have to really agree that the Newton's gravity model is actually a symmetric model, but in social gravity model and the many force of interactions are asymmetric, and the attraction between object A to object B is something, and then which is entirely different from the attraction between object B to object A. So this is all direction and orientation specific. So such studies how we handled. And then to come to the core geoscience topic, and this is a lower Indus basin. I don't know whether Nagjyoti has shown this application, and because he has just submitted his thesis. So this the Nagjyoti was a previous speaker on 6th or 7th. He has given a talk for the same school. And so the lower Indus basin was actually partitioned into 31 watersheds, and each watershed is actually classified in terms of the superficial roughness. And the superficial roughness, it is not just a global index. And if you change the characteristics of the structuring element that you are using, and you get a spectrum of superficial roughness values, from that I am sure most of the hydrologists or the geophysicists can, or geomorphologists, they can derive a domain specific inferences from those spectrum of roughness values. How we have done that? It is a multi-scale pattern spectra analysis, or we can also say that so it is a granulometric analysis. And then this is other application, and you have a digital elevation model. Let us say this is F1 and this is F2. And if you have to really transform F1 into F2, like a motorbike becoming a tiger in the morphing process, you can do that by using interpolation techniques. But the interpolation that we have proposed is a morphological interpolation, which is completely nonlinear in nature, and it has various advantages when you compare that interpolation with linear interpolation techniques, which are very popular in the studies. And so how to perform those morphological interpolations, that will also, I would very quickly cover those things. And another interesting part, so if you are familiar with the unified Andhra Pradesh, and we have 4 southern states, and these southern states, and so how they have shown the boundaries, and these boundaries are based on the geopolitical boundaries, and it has the area within this, and you have Kerala has a smaller area, followed by Tamil Nadu, and then Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, unified Andhra Pradesh. And if you have to represent some variable for these particular states, the variable, let us say the crime rate. If the crime rate is very high in Kerala and very low in Andhra Pradesh, Kerala has to be shown much bigger, and Andhra Pradesh has to be shown much smaller, and accordingly other states. So this is like the variable strength. The moment you know the variable strength, can you really deform your the geopolitical unit objects proportional to that the variable strength? As I mentioned, crime rate is one of the variables. If you talk about population, if the population is very high in Kerala, very low in Andhra Pradesh, obviously Kerala has to be shown much bigger, and then the Andhra Pradesh has to be shown much smaller. This is actually a cartogram analysis. It is called the representation in terms of cartogram. It has various advantages all through whatever the maps that we have been preparing and showing are the choropleth maps, and studying the spatiotemporal behavior on the choropleth maps. Actually, many of our GIS packages would handle that, layers, and then put on layer, and then finally you derive some kind of decision support system. But if those layers can be for different variables according to their variable strength, if you can generate the cartogram kind of the maps, and then you have a altogether different kind of spatial statistics and the spatial temporal behavioral study options, right? And this is the cartogram of US population cartogram of United States. You can see they look, they're actually cartogram units, and California has the largest population, and it was shown much bigger. And so assuming that Nevada has the largest population, and then that has to be shown much smaller, much bigger, though the the state size is much smaller, right? And so that is the idea and how we have done that. And then here, if you have a large number of images in a database, and if you have to pair them from best pair to worst pair, which two images are the best pair and which two images are the worst pair? And so how we have adopted some kind of interaction based studies, and that is there here. And you have a digital elevation model. We made it into 4 quadrants, and out of 4 quadrants, which 2 quadrants are best pairs and which 2 quadrants are worst pairs. And so based on some morphological distances, we have done that. I have given a long thing, and if there is no time, and this itself is sufficient for you to have some idea where all I have applied just mathematical morphology, nothing else. So to give you an overview, spatial data, geoscience, remote sensing, geospatial data, basics of mathematical morphology, which I would cover in the subsequent 3 or 4 slides. So the mathematical morphology in geosciences, Ridge Valley network extraction, you have seen some images and how that would be done, and scale invariant but shape dependent measures, and why they are really important when we are talking about the terrestrial surface, or the physics of geophysical dynamics of the terrestrial surfaces, roughness characterization via granulometries, and all these are some of the transformations which were nicely proposed by taking 4 fundamental morphological operations: erosion, dilation, opening, and closing. And in remote sensing, very popular studies which have shown very significant results is the morphological profiles, extended morphological profiles, attribute profiles, and based on those morphological profiles, how hyperspectral images were classified. And that studies were actually initiated by John Benedictson and group. Subsequently, they have published hundreds of papers, very promising results. And grouping of remotely sensed satellite images, which I have shown just in the previous slide, and the morphological distances, how they would be used to really cluster or group the images within a database. And then band selection. And so in remote sensing, hyperspectral remote sensing data, and we get hundreds of channel bands, and how to systematically remove some of the redundant bands. And so would it give a solution if you compute dilation distances between every image in the cube to every other image in the cube, and then you can create a kind of a distance based interaction matrix. From there you can derive which are those bands which are having redundancy in the cube, right? And the geospatial data sciences, and the simulation of landscapes and watersheds and power loss, and skeletonization by influence zone, weighted skeletonization by influence zones, hierarchical morphological interpolations, and spatial reasoning, how the above studies could be integrated for better understanding the process dynamics. And that is what we have to see. And this is actually an education column article which I have published in December last year in IEEE GRSM. So here, and I always used to tell, along with mathematical morphology, I see one wonderful data source, data coming as digital elevation models, spent billions of dollars to generate digital elevation models for the whole Earth terrestrial surface, but they have not been heavily used by researchers. And I would request all the audience, look at digital elevation models. It is not just very colorful images of the terrestrial surface. And digital elevation models are always with just a gray shade image, but it has a rich amount of geometric, morphologic, and topological quantities. I would call them as GMT quantities. And if you are familiar with one of the good mathematical fields like mathematical morphology, wavelets, or fuzzy set theory, and I'm sure you can unravel all these GMT quantities from digital elevation models, and with which you can study the terrestrial dynamics in a much better way. So you can have a look at this particular article. This is just to motivate people knowing mathematics, how important it is to study the terrestrial dynamics. And if this is the terrestrial surface, and retrieval analysis, reasoning, and modeling, and how we will handle, and basics of mathematical morphology. And I'm sure some of you are very familiar with the word mathematical morphology. We have binary mathematical morphology. If you want to perform morphological analysis on the maps or the information or thematic information that is shown as a noise-free information like water bodies and no water bodies, You want to find out aerial extent of a water body. You want to find out the boundary length of the water body. You want to find out what is the longest axis of the water body. You want to find out what is the shortest axis of the water body. Doesn't necessarily be water bodies. And you can talk about any mapped feature, and a watershed itself is like a planar feature. And river basin itself is like a planar feature. Or some of the segmented zones from some other source data. And so that is analysis of such kind of thematic maps is possible through binary mathematical morphology, where we have binary erosion, dilation, and opening and closings. And the many transformations developed based on those four fundamental operations. And grayscale morphology is about your images. And so where you have in the data, you have multi-valued data. So like the pixel spectral reflectance values would change from one place to another place. And in the satellite images, it is quite obvious. And then do you have, instead of binarizing that particular data, and can we directly apply some kind of morphological operations? We have grayscale morphological operations. And now another advanced study of late gaining a lot of popularity is given an image. That image can be shown in a kind of graph form. And then the graph in the sense you have nodes and edges, and you have weighted nodes and weighted edges. And on the graph, and can you perform these morphological operations? So you have graph morphological erosion, graph morphological dilation, and subsequent other operations. And adaptive mathematical morphology, many times people used to ask, so how to choose a structuring element or probing rule to investigate the image? It depends on the user's end result, anticipated result. And so how to derive an appropriate structuring element, very appropriate for a specific data that you are investigating, and we have adaptive mathematical morphology. So if someone wants to venture into mathematical morphology research, I would really recommend graph mathematical morphology and adaptive mathematical morphology, because binary and grayscale morphology is almost established. So to tell that, and in entire data, I would say data can be converted into binary form. And the moment I would simply say the data in a multi-valued format is a kind of function f. And if you want to decompose that into kind of black and white binary images, and we call them as spatial objects in probably in geography or a GIS context, and all spatial objects are given in notation with XMB, and these are all spatial objects. F of xy is nothing but a function. You can call that as a digital elevation model itself is a kind of f of xy. And what is the energy under the f of xy? The sum of all grayscale values over xy spatial coordinates is the energy, or some people they call it as area or the volume. And B and G are the actually probing rules. A flat structuring element is shown with a kind of B, and a non-flat structuring element is shown with a G. And then you have functions Fi and Fj, assuming that these are two different images. And if you have to perform some interpolation operation, so Fi has to be slowly transformed into Fj, which is very obvious. And if you take a digital elevation model of desert region of some 10 years back and current thing, and how this digital elevation model of a desert region, desert morphology has been changed over a period of 10 years. You don't have data in between this 10-year period. You have a source DEM and the target DEM for the same region, but the times that they were generated were of almost 10 years interval. And then can you really make that highly discrete DEMs into continuous mode? So to do that, and you should generate interpolated DEMs in a hierarchical manner, and then you can convert Fi into Fj in a continuous time and space. So that is for that I have shown these notations. And then dilation is shown with a plus in an open circle, and erosion is shown with a minus in an open circle. And erosion followed by dilation is opening, and dilation followed by erosion is closing. And these two operators are nonlinear operators, and through which you can smoothen the data in a nonlinear fashion. smoothing the data from inside and smoothing the data from outside. Let us assume that you have a one-dimensional signal and you want to roll the ball on top of this signal. And so whether that ball can go to every place, and if this signal is so intricate and ball radius is much bigger and it cannot visit every place, and whatever the region that it cannot visit is shown like a kind of the region that should get smoothed. And similarly, if you roll the ball under the signal and whatever the region that it could not reach would be smoothed out. So that is a simple rolling ball mechanism, and the people will call in statistics. And then we know that intersections, unions, and all that. And so if there are, let us say there are two water bodies of two different time periods, and if you want to intersect them, why do you want to intersect them? If you want to union them, there is a clear importance for this kind of intersections and unions when you are talking about how this water body morphology has been changed from time t to time t+1, and you require to perform some kind of interpolations. And then similarly, instead of making them into binary form, and if you want to use a digital elevation model and of I and digital elevation model of J, let us assume I and J are talking about two different time periods, and how to compute the infima and how to compute the suprema. And it is point-wise minimum value and point-wise maximum value, and they are useful in subsequent studies. And similarly, if you extend to distances, how to compute the distance between the two objects, how to compute the distance between the two functions. Two functions, probably my face and probably Shyamlal face. And we have the grayscale picture, black and white picture, but with different shades. And so how similar are these two features, two photographs? And so do we have some approach to compute some kind of similarity index, a crude similarity index value? We can do that through digital dilation distances, erosion distances, in turn Hausdorff dilation distance and Hausdorff erosion distances. And then area under the infima and area under the suprema, and distances between the two functions, and distances between the two objects, that is what is shown here. And Karnataka as a patch as an object, and Andhra Pradesh as a patch as an object. You have to compute the dilation distances between Karnataka and Andhra Pradesh, and they are not points, and they are objects, a combination of points, a compact objects. And how do you compute those things? And we have certain approaches through morphological distances. And similarly, the structuring element, as I mentioned, it has certain characteristic information. You can increase the size of the structuring element because this is very essential when you are performing the multi-scale operations, multi-scale binary morphological operations, multi-scale grayscale morphological operations, and multi-scale graph morphological operations. And for that, and you have to keep on increasing the size of the structuring element, n size structuring element. And so what is that n? And then you can define that, right? These are the same operations I have shown in binary domain and the grayscale domain. And I don't take much time beyond this on this. And the structuring elements, what are they? And I am talking about the probing rules and a flat structuring element, which we call it as a disk in the 8 connectivity grid, and disk in the 4 connectivity grid is a kind of, a rhombical diamond. And then if you are putting the origin at the center, obviously these two are symmetric about the origin. And if you rotate it to 180 degrees, if you want to see the reflection of this structuring element, it is a very symmetric flat structuring element. This is also symmetric flat structuring element. This is also symmetric flat structuring element. The moment you change the origin to one of the vertices, and about the origin, if you rotate it to 180 degrees, and it is not the same as the original structuring element, in turn symmetric structuring elements. These are very powerful structuring elements which we use some kind of directional spatial relationships between the objects, right? As I was mentioning, mathematics is all about making the relationship between the objects, and how good you can make the relationships between the objects and the functions, and your mathematical theory is very robust. And then the non-flat structuring elements, you can see flat structuring elements with different sizes, but the shape is same, a rhombical of 3 by 3, 5 by 5, and 7 by 7. And the non-flat structuring elements, you can see this is like a kind of pyramid, and then it's increased size and it's further increased size. And non-flat structuring elements are also useful in entire mathematical morphology to make the relationship between not only objects, between the functions. And we have certain directional structuring elements. So northwest to southeast, and north-south, and northeast to southwest, and east to west, and we have all these directional structuring elements. And the representations of the equations, the grayscale erosion with respect to non-flat structuring element, grayscale dilation with respect to non-flat structuring element. These are nothing but you take a structuring element of 3 by 3 within that window, and you take the minimum of the grayscale values in the function, and then replace the central value with that particular minimum value within the neighborhood. If you take the maximum value, you get a morphological grayscale dilations, and their corresponding multiscale versions keep on performing the same erosion operation, and it becomes, the function will reach to a flat level with the global minimum value as the value spread across the whole region. And so keep on performing dilations, and global maximum value will occupy all the grid cells, right? So you have binary morphological operations effects, erosion, dilation, opening and closing, and their corresponding grayscale morphological operations in shown in a kind of federation thing. And then graph morphological erosion, graph erosions, graph dilation, and graph opening and graph closings are shown with different kind of structuring elements. A structuring element in graph domain are chosen in something entirely different, right? And then subsequently, using those basic morphological operations, you have skeletonization, and which involves skeletal subset decomposition, and then taking the union of all skeletal subsets, you get the skeleton. A good example for the skeleton is you have a black road, and the typical skeleton of that black road is its divider, the median line. And how to extract that, the median line, and you have the morphological skeletonization, and where it involves a multi-scale erosions and an opening operation. As I mentioned, opening does a kind of an nonlinear smoothing, and it filters out the sharp peaks and then retains it smoothens the object. And then the other one is for the roughness computation, and we have computation of P log P. You all know that Shannon's entropy equation, and sum of that P log P, n ranging from 0 to capital N, and the negative of that is a kind of uncertainty index or a morphological entropy. And how do you compute that? And you have to transform the given data in a multi-scale opening form, erosion followed by dilation of the data loses certain energy. Erosion followed by dilation would lose further energy. And erosion for n number of consecutive times, and dilation followed by dilation of n number of times would make the system or the data loses a lot of information, which is nth degree specific energy it loses. And that kind of information is shown here, and it is called a pattern spectra analysis. So that pattern spectrum, the loss of energy, and which you can see here, loss of energy from a higher cycle of opening and the lower cycle of opening, and is typically the subtraction of the area of the lower cycle of opening and the higher cycle of opening. And what is the loss of information at that between those scales, and would be specified here, and divide that with the total energy of the data or the function or the object. And then this is allowing you to compute the probability value at that nth cycle. And for all nth cycle ratios of these probability values derived from this ratio, you will compute it here, and you get an uncertainty index, which is typically the roughness index of the function, the roughness value. If you change the characteristics of V, and you get a different kind of roughness value, And that is where I say the physics of terrestrial surface can be studied so well by using the mathematical morphological operations. And if you have the whole idea about morphological operations. So here spatial thinking and morphological thinking has a lot of significance. And then what we have seen here is all about the binary skeletonization, binary granulometries, binary interpolations, and morphological distances. Interpolations, how do you compute? Take the intersection of water body at time t and water body at time t plus 1 and their unions, and unions would be eroded and dilations, the intersections would be dilated for different n values, and take the union, you get how a water body at time t and a water body at time t plus 1 between that and what would be the water body at time in between the time t and time t plus 1. And such kind of things are binary interpolations, and extending that to the total functions where you get the multi-valued data like a spectral reflectance values varying from 0 to 255 if you are talking about 8 bits per pixel, and you can compute skeletons of those kind of functions and uncertainty index of those functions like watersheds in a river basin and DEM watersheds. And then their interpolations, instead of the sets, we are talking about the functions here. Instead of intersections and unions, we are talking about infima and suprema. And so these are the distances between dilation and erosion distances between the functions. And then a large number of application domains, and it was applied in petrology, GIS, remote sensing, geosciences, and then what transformation is applied in what context, and I have given a kind of tabular information. So to show you the Ridge Valley networks, and then these are some of the papers we published over a period of the last 25 years, and this is a DEM, and when you convert that into simple black and white, you choose some threshold value and then it would be converted like this. But within this, you have elevation values, which are very conspicuous here. A potential valley connectivity network is this particular network, right? What is that we have followed? A skeletonization, which involves multi-scale erosions and the arbitrary sized opening cycle, right? So the algorithm is here, but I don't want to spend more time on explaining those algorithms because I have to show many other applications. So which shows an erosion nth scale, nth cycle erosions, and the nth cycle, same nth cycle erosion is smoothened once, and that output is subtracted from the the nth cycle eroded version. And then what you get the smoothened version smoothed out, and those smoothed out regions are the potential flow paths of the streamlines, the river water, and those all possible smoothed out points. If you take the combination of all that or union, you get a kind of river network. You can see this is a digital elevation model, and all green lines are valley connectivity networks. All blue lines are the ridge connectivity networks. You can see that each valley segment, connectivity segment, is embedded between two ridge lines, which is nothing but there are two hills are running parallel to each other. Obviously, there will be a valley in between, and that valley is the potential stream path, right? So further, transforming it into their watersheds. And so watershed transformation, which is applied in image processing, is a very powerful transformation, which was following a simple drop of water principle or the flooding principle. Assuming that you have one water body here, one water body here, one water body here, and you allow those water bodies to flood incessantly, and then obviously the water body gets bulged, and then at one place, and the flood water front lines coming from 2-3 water bodies would meet at one place, and that is where you construct the dam. That is the principle involved in partitioning the digital elevation model into its watersheds or a segmented zones, which is a powerful topic. I can say at least there are 50 to 70 PhD theses were done on a simple morphological watershed transformation, and with there are power watersheds, and then the simple classical watersheds, and following the flood simulation approach and drop of water principle and such kind of things. So to show you where else we can apply morphological, skeletonization has given this kind of results. Morphological shape decomposition, if somebody is very familiar with river networks, if you see the river networks like this, and a topologist, a mathematician will tell all these networks are topologically similar. But what a core geomorphologist wants, and the core geomorphologist or a geophysicist wants to show the basic geometric distinction between these three topologically invariant networks. And geometrically they are different, but that segment wise, if you perform morphometric analysis, and they would give you the topological quantities like bifurcation ratio, stream length ratio, and stream area ratio, just the same. And with in effect that you get the inferences from the morphometric analysis is not just sufficient for the core geophysicist. For core geophysicist, what we want is what is the geometric index which can show the basic distinction between among these between the topologically invariant network basins, right? So for that, what we have used, look at this, an Apollonian space which I have shown earlier, and which was packed with non-overlapping disks. Each disk is like octagonal shape, and the moment you pack this, how we have done, you keep on performing morphological openings until it reaches to the last but one level, and then you reconstruct that. You can reconstruct this particular octagon and remove that from the Apollonian space. On the remainder, you perform morphological openings recursively, and then with that way you can actually pack the whole Apollonian space with octagons of various different sizes, and such that there is no space uncovered, right? And once you have those quantities, octagonal is the shape, and then their number of radius versus number, and obviously smaller octagons are large in number and the larger octagons are small in number, which is following a wonderful physical law, a law of the power law relationship based. And then you have a network extracted from the digital elevation model, and for that network you remove from the digital elevation model, and the rest of the region you just binarise it, and this is how it looks. And you have subtracted the network or the skeleton from the basin, and whatever is left is in the white space. That white space has to be packed with non-overlapping disks of various different shapes. Doesn't necessarily be octagon. You can choose a triangle, you can choose an octagon, you can choose a hexagon or a simple square block or rhombical shape, and you can choose whatever the shape that you want. And with each of the shape, and you get a typical power law which is universal in nature, right? So that is the idea. By following that, and we have taken some basins of some Malaysian region, and hill slope region was packed with octagons, and then we derived the power law relationships, and those power law relationships are scale invariant, but mind you, shape dependent. The moment you change the structuring element shape, and you get a different kind of power law which is scale invariant. So what matters is not just the scale, and what matters is the shape. And you cultivate a kind of morphological thinking. The way you look at earth, the way you look at any kind of process is entirely different. Of late I was reading a nice book written by Lindbergh, and if you get a chance, you read that. The book is about shape. The book title is Shape. That book is all talking about geometry for everything, and he is talking about geometry for political science, geometry for environmental science, geometry for mathematicians. He's a great mathematician, a wonderful popular book, and I think you will understand how important is geometry there, right? So that is another study. You have seen through morphological shape decomposition what is that we can do. We can derive a scale invariant parameters, but those measures are shape dependent. So that is where shape has a lot of role. And the other one is the granulometric analysis. You look at this particular DEM, digital elevation model, and if you keep on performing multi-scale openings with increasing cycle, this is cycle 1, cycle 40, cycle 80, with the rhombus structuring element, which is flat and symmetric about the origin, which is shown here. It is losing its energy, and the grayscale values you can see slowly getting diminished, and it is becoming darker and darker. Its contrast is multiscale closing, converse operation, a dual operation. You keep on performing multiscale closings of cycle 1, 40, 80, 120, and 160 with respect to rhombical shape structuring element, and it is gaining energy. How the loss of information and gaining information, or the loss of energy or the gaining of energy, so it is not uniform, and from cycle to cycle it has a different kind of loss of energy pattern, and that loss of energy pattern across the cycles is all talking about the pattern spectrum. That pattern spectrum quantifies the shape size content within the digital elevation model with certain amount of energy. And similarly, that pattern spectrum values for gaining the energy when you are performing closing, and that would give you another kind of set of parameters. From this loss of energy, which is not uniform across the cycles, would get you an opportunity to compute the probability values, and similarly the probability values for the gaining energy. And so using those probability values, P log P for all cycles n ranging from 0 to capital N, and you can compute the foreground roughness, you can compute the background roughness, and with respect to rhombus, circle in 8 connectivity grid square, and octagonal structuring element. And so you have another set of scale invariant measures directly applied onto the digital elevation models, but they are all shape dependent. And so that is where can you make a relationship between the process involved in a watershed and this type of structuring element that we have used. And can we call that structuring element as a kind of a discrete force? I don't know. That is a in very vague term, and then one has to really ponder having a hard thinking, one can really establish the relationship between the process and the type of structuring element that we are using. The similar ideas we have used on the watershed that we have partitioned from the lower Indus Basin, and the granulometric index, global granulometric index, where B is like compact symmetric about the origin. But here the structuring element that we used are the directional structuring elements, one-dimensional structuring elements, and with 4 different direction structuring elements like B1, B2, B3, B4, and we have computed the roughness values for each of the watershed, and then higher directional roughness index value in whichever direction it is there, and we have shown the direction of that hatching in that particular direction, and the lowest among those 4 granulometric index values are roughness index values, and we have followed a different kind of classification. I would say when we are talking about the classification, doesn't just don't get carried away by very powerful classification tools, but we have other classification tools which are very relevant for the terrestrial surface classification, and probably some of the classification techniques people have been talking for the last 2 weeks may not be appropriate to apply on the digital elevation models, but I would say the granulometry based classification is very powerful because it has a lot of geometric essence, right? So this is how these digital elevation models look like. And then what would happen by following different kind of structuring elements for different cycles of openings and closings, and you can see some of those patterns. And this is also specifically which watershed is losing a lot of information in with which directional structuring element, and so which is not losing much information with what kind of structuring element. We have shown these snapshots, and this is the classification results at the end. And then so we have seen ridge valley extraction and morphological shape decomposition and granulometry based roughness analysis in the remote sensing part. And there are some interesting studies you can see. 2005 John Benditson and Palmson, and then so these are the people given the original idea of using the morphological profiles. What is morphological profile? Morphological profile is just like the granulometric analysis. So conventional morphological mathematical morphologists will call as granulometric analysis, but these people, they called it as a morphological profile. There is no much difference, right? So when you have a hyperspectral Lemieux cube and how you select the bands and how you classify those things, I don't want to spend much time on that, and this is not my own work, but my own work is somewhere here in using the ranks for pairs of images. When I mentioned that there are large number of images in a database, and how do you rank the pair? If let us say F1, F2, F3, F100 you have, and so is F1 can be paired very well with F99. So if F1 and F99 are just the same, you get this particular equation value as 1, right? You can generate a kind of, you see what are all the parameters you have, infima between image to image, Fi and Fj, suprema, Fi to Fj. Obviously, suprema values are because of point-wise maximum value, its corresponding area, and its corresponding area, the ratio, and the erosion distances, dilation distances, what is the minimum you take on the numerator, and what is the maximum between those erosion dilation distances, the denominator, and you take these two ratios and take the product. If that product value is close to 1, and you can call Fi and Fj are close to each other at the best pair. And if it is going towards 0, and you call that that pair is a worst pair, right? And like that we derive the index for the pairs of images, and then we can classify or we can group them. You look at here, there are this is a DEM, and we made deliberately into 4 quadrants, quadrant 1, 2, 3, 4, and we call it as F11, F12, F13, and F14. So which are the two pairs are the best pairs here, and you can see it here by following the ranking index for the pairs. Like obviously quadrant 1 to quadrant 1 is the best pair, quadrant 2 to quadrant 2 is the best pair, quadrant 3 to quadrant 3 is the best pair. All diagonal values would talk about the rank index for the image to itself, and whereas for other places you look at 4.493 is the largest value. So the quadrant 1 and 3 are the relatively best pair compared to other possibilities, right? And this is what we have done, and for in a hierarchically partitioned data, and then we establish some kind of approach here. And when you have hundreds of channels in a hyperspectral image cube, and how do you select the band? So which bands are appropriate for your own application? And we have followed a simple dilation distances, and on the features that we have extracted from each of the image within the hyperspectral cube, and then we compute the dilation distances. And based on the dilation distances, we derive which are those bands can be removed and which are those bands can be selected for further study. So that is about applications of morphology and remote sensing. And then the bigger part and geospatial data science, and we have done some work, and you see this, and how to derive a kind of fractal Hortonian digital elevation model. You have a simple fractal here, how it is generated. I don't go into those details because that takes time, because that is coming from the body of fractal geometry literature. And then so once you have some initiator, by converting that into a kind of skeletal network, which is possible through morphological skeletonization, and then you keep on pruning that particular morphological skeleton. What is the pruning? And assuming that the skeletal network is a kind of dry tree, and lead the dry tree twigs at the fingertips, and allow that fire to propagate towards its trunk with uniform speed, and how those at discrete time intervals, and how that tree is getting burned. And you can actually do the morphological pruning here. And so each pruned version is actually coded with some colors, and then each level of pruned skeleton is dilated to the same level of dilation, which is exactly similar to the pruning cycle number. And then overlay on one another, you get a kind of you have actually transformed into kind of a function. A black and white object is transformed into a kind of function. This function, I don't say it is a distance function, but it is a skeletonization based function. And then when you give a kind of vertical exaggeration, and you can see this kind of landscapes. And so this would give some insights to the geophysicist to how to generate a digital watershed DEM, which is mimicking a kind of the realistic watershed. And once we know that, and that is where the idea of digital twins comes into picture. And once you know the process involved in that particular watershed, and we can somehow explain that particular watershed in a discrete space. Right, this is also kind of watersheds by influence zones. And so these are all large number of water bodies traced from satellite data in the Vizianagaram district of Andhra Pradesh. And those water bodies, when you allow them to flood incessantly with uniform speed, and where the flood water front lines coming from the two water bodies are extinguishing each other, and you construct a dam, and so that kind of dam line is nothing but a watershed line, and you can see for each water body there is a corresponding catchment basin, right? And so this is how we generate by following a flooding principle, and the flooding principle involves the dilation process. It's a continuous dilation of water bodies with a uniform speed, and you can derive a kind of algorithm, and that algorithm is based on this particular equation. This is skeletonization by zone of influence equation, and by performing the skeletonization by weighted skeletonization by zone of influence, and that idea you can actually apply on some 35 rain gauge stations are there, and those the temperature values or rainfall values are varying from one rain gauge station to another rain gauge station. And then the point specific data you can convert into polygonal form, and the discrete data you have converted into a kind of contiguous form, which is where we have used skeletonization by influence zone algorithm, right? So similar idea we have also used for the cartogram things. You can see the possible cartograms for different variable strengths for the 4 states. This is the area specific cartogram, area equalization map, you can say it, and with the different flooding speeds, and if you impose on each of the things, the faster the speed, higher the speed of the flooding, higher the strength of the variable, and variable can be anything, and by using those strengths of the variables, and you can generate the flooding process, and which would eventually give you cartogram like things, right? So the 4 possible cartograms we have shown with different variable strengths. And then that is the principle we also used in the converting the point specific data into polygon conversion. I'm not sure whether this particular animation is visible. You can see how those things were gaining the continuous simulation, and you can see it. And from the points and how they are growing with the different speeds, right? And the next one is about the cartograms, and the cartogram that we have given is a geodesic morphology based cartogram, which could protect the global shape, and to some extent, the local shapes also. And this is how we have generated the population cartogram for the United States thing. And these are the other methods, which are also very powerful methods given by other computational geometers. And here, Shamlal, how much time I have?
Sir, you can finish maybe another 10 minutes, fine. No issue.
Yeah. In 5 minutes, I will finish
Yes,
it,
sir.
and I'll wrap it
Yes,
up.
sir.
But
No
I'll
problem.
raise several open questions, and that is for the audience to ponder about. And you
Yes,
look at this on the left panel, and all these maps are epidemic spread. In 1896, there was a bubonic plague which affected western part of India, and so after a few months, and it is person probably migrated to eastern India, and then that bubonic plague over a period of 11 years, 1896, 97, 98 until 1906, and it has affected the whole Indian subcontinent. So some 3 million people died. So this was almost the 1 century ago, more than 1 century ago. And these maps we could get from some source, and there was one George Christakos in who did his PhD in Harvard, and he used to work on health geographics, and he has provided this data. So, but we don't have this data in a real-time mode. So these are snapshots for annual intervals. There are 11 maps here. Can we make it in a real-time mode? And how that can be made? And this is the source and target. Between that, I could generate a large number of possible interpolations in a hierarchical manner. And then between this, and I have generated a set of other interpolations. Between this and this, other set of interpolations. And what we have used morphological interpolations. So the equation is source and target, x1 and x2, intersect them, and then why the power went off here. You can see the slides, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah. So I'll go ahead. Okay. So by intersecting these two things, and you will get one output. By taking the union of these two, source and target, you get another output. Intersection should be eroded and morphological eroded, and then unions should be morphological eroded, and the intersection should be morphological dilated. And then take the output of those two outputs, and then you keep on doing it for higher cycle of erosions and dilations. You get one median element between the source and target. This is a hierarchical process. Once you have one median, source to median and median to target, and then you will get another two medians. And then this is a hierarchical process. This grows, the interpolation pictures will grow in 2 power n fashion. A pattern, and then you put all of them in a sequence generated for successive the bubonic plague maps, thematic maps, and then you can see that how it has actually grown. You can see we want to actually convert that highly sparse data into a denser thematic map, and in a real-time mode, because it is not just 11 snapshots. We have about 164 interpolations plus the 11 original snapshots that we had. Right, and this is how this bubonic plague perhaps spread. We don't have a validity, right? And this is how I'll just try to do it. Right, and this is how this is done. Right, and I'll just close this. So these are the equations that you have seen on a binary, just a bubonic plague thematic map. And if you perform them in on the functions like digital elevation models, so how do you compute infimum? Infima is nothing but the minimum pointwise minimum value. Suprema is pointwise maximum value. The median is the infima of all the median functions. How median functions are computed? You have suprema getting eroded with nth cycle B, and you have infima getting dilated with nth cycle B, and then these outputs you take infima, and then you have the way to do that, right? So their illustrative examples are given here. And but what exactly happens, and the source and target, you can create one median function. Between source and median, you can create another median function. Between median and this target, you can create another median function. This is it grows in a hierarchical manner, and you put them in a systematic way between source and target. All these interpolations are generated, and you see a kind of morphing. One landscape is becoming another landscape. So why do you say that one landscape? This is, I would say, landscape at time t and landscape at time t plus 1. And we can actually convert that particular whole data into in a real-time form. So this is actually my grayscale morphological interpolations. And so that is what is elaborated here. But with flat structuring element, how those grayscale morphological interpolations will go. And you can see that morphing here. And similarly with 8 connectivity flat structuring element, and how that can be actually transformed with a non-flat structuring element, how the landscape A is becoming landscape B over a period of time, right? So this is these are some of the animations that I have created, and then the quantitative spatial reasoning, and I would quickly finish it off. So what is involved here is computing the dilation distances. Computing the dilation distances. So object A to object AA to AJ, and so So you keep on dilating it until Aj becomes the part of the dilated version. You can see it here. And when I keep on dilating it, and the minimum number of dilation cycles required to occupy Aj is probably 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 cycles has actually occupied this block. And similarly, when you keep on dilating it, and how it is dilated and to occupy the AI. So the dilation distance between AI to Aj is different from Aj to AI, because AI and Aj are not identical. They are dissimilar, and in turn you get a different direction specific dilation distances. Using that principle, 66 water bodies are traced, and from every water body to every other water body dilation distances are computed, and then in turn you have a 66 by 66 dilation distance matrix, and we have performed the weighted skeletonization by zone of influence on these water bodies to construct their influence zones. And then again for the influence zones, you have 66 influence zones, and dilation distance were computed. And then you have 66 by 66 dilation distance interaction matrix for zones and the water bodies. And then how do you handle that? And once you have, so for 3-body problem I have given here, and distance x1, x2, x3, and the 3 by 3 dilation distance matrix, you take maximum of the column, you record here, maximum of this column record here, maximum of this column record here, minimum of all these values coming from which object is the strategically located object. So that is the principle we used in the spatial optimization process to find out which is that water body strategically located. From there, it is easy to reach out to all other water bodies with minimal energy expenditure, right? This is a kind of traveling salesman problem, right? So for the zones also, its corresponding zone has come as a strategically located. So that is the principle we used, and similarly we have adopted that for river basins and then political units, and how we can establish the relationships, the distance relationship between object, this object to this object, this object to this object, this object to this object, like that. It's all direction specific. And then what we followed is a dilation distances, direction based dilation distances. How many minimum number of dilation cycles are required to object another object? And this is a recursive process. And then from there, you can find out automatically the relationship between the object A to B, A to C, and then you can generate the directional relationships, which is typically based on directional dilation distance, right? And using that principle, if I show you this, we have so many states here, and if land area is the variable that I am considering, and which two states are having the better interaction in terms of trade or in terms of land area. This is just a theoretical study where we used location significance of the state and the gravity values that you are talking is the mass, the land area, right? So you have considered the distances between ith to j, state ith to state j, and the location significance value. For each state, there is a specific location significance index, and using that location significant index of each state and their land areas and the distances between that state I to state j, whatever the modified gravity model that we have given, this is the modified gravity model, and we can show the interaction matrices. Highly interacting states are the initially shown states. You can see red and blue, red and blue, red and blue. So these are the states are interacting in a much better way. So obviously the interaction between Goa and Nagaland is very feeble because of the fact that both are having exterior states, having been exterior states, and then distances far from each other, and then the land area is also the very small, and those things you would look at the feebly interacting states in terms of land area interaction matrices is exterior states, right? This is what is shown through the modified gravity model. I think with this, I will try to wrap it up, and then to give you some highlights, digital elevation model is an engineering marvel, an important source of data for geoscientists. I request the audience to really look at digital elevation model, not just the satellite images, whether you can really deal with the geometric, morphologic, and topological quantities for your the modeling studies, or generating a digital twin for a specific terrestrial process. So the other thing, mathematical morphology is an area of geoscience that most people don't realize will literally change the way they look at Earth. The DEM is data, mathematical morphology is a wonderful mathematical theory. So a robust mathematical theory that needs more attention by geoscience and remote sensing communities. So these are some of the books that we have published, and then I will show in the next slide. And so if someone is very keen to follow the the Blackboard lectures, and these are the lectures, some 18 lectures I gave in NPTEL style in IIT Kharagpur, and it is easy to follow because I have wrapped up everything in just 1.5 hours. But if I had to spend, let us say, 18 hours to explain these some 80 or 90 slides, and how I would really go, and this is like explaining everything on the Blackboard. So those things you can just follow. These are some of the YouTube links I have provided. And then this is some call for papers, and still deadline is there until end of September. Mathematical morphology in geoscience, remote sensing, and geospatial data science. A quick recap, and we know the importance of information retrieval, analysis, quantitative information analysis, and quantitative information reasoning, simulation modeling, and all that. Can we use that ideas and the knowledge for attractor construction? I don't know, but I have generated some attractors for the toy models. With all these studies, and can we develop a spatiotemporal behavior of a terrestrial phenomena? So one of the phenomena is like sand dune behavior. The other one being probably how water body aerial dynamics is changing. And yes, theoretically speaking, we can do that. But attractor constructions, and we require to have some knowledge about dynamical system theory. You can see how the water bodies are changing across the seasons. Potential attractors would be like this. Some water bodies will die out. Some water bodies will grow and then attract into a fixed point. Some water bodies will behave in a very chaotic way. And these are the attractors. And so from these attractors, we can find out whether predicting the predictability of a specific process is possible or not. Simple attractors will allow us to predict the predictability is very high, and strange attractors will make our lives really very complicated to make the predictions. Some sand dunes, again toy models, and what would be the corresponding attractors with the different dynamic complexities. So at the end, this is not a job of one person. A great teamwork with excellent coordination is required. Some of the key references I always refer as there was a special issue of Indian International Journal of Remote Sensing, which I edited with John Serra, and then other things. A wonderful book. John Serra's book is very complicated, very difficult to follow because he's also a mathematician and a civil engineer, and he has written in a mathematician style. P. Wall, an agriculture engineer who did his PhD under John Serra, written a wonderful book. I think if someone wants to venture into this, follow this. Someone wants some ideas about geomorphology and GIS and morphology application, you can look at my book of 2013. So at the end, I'm grateful to GRSS for giving me an opportunity for the DL-ship, and the Bangalore IEEE GRSS chapter, and NIT Karnataka for hosting this. Thank you very much. And then I would stop sharing, but if you have any questions, I know it is not that easy to grasp what is there in the whole thing, but what to do. And so I was given only 1.5 hours time, and a few people allow me to give in-person mode lectures. I would really love to come and give lectures in your institutes. So incidentally, about 5-6 years ago, NIT Surathkal has introduced mathematical morphology as an elective. But so far, no student has taken, and I have actually offered that syllabus. And Professor Gonda used to be there, and he was the one who offered that as an elective. So with that, thank you very much.